Hi Nicola.
Hello Ruth.
Thanks for participating in my project.
My pleasure, thank you for your interest.
Why don't we start at the beginning? So, how did you hear about the Alexander Technique? How did you start having lessons? What was the initial motivation?
Well, the first thing that I knew about the Alexander Technique is that you sit up very upright on the toilet and you need socks without holes in it. And I was living with Lucas Lorenzi, who was in the training class in Freiburg. And that was my first encounter with the Alexander Technique. And at one point I picked him up from the training class, and he used to bring people in the class back home to the flat. And everyone was going on about the Alexander Technique, take a lesson, got to take a lesson. So at one point, that was in December 1981, I took my first lesson. I was 24 at the time. Oh, 1982, sorry.
And who was your first teacher?
I honestly can't remember if it's Aranka Stimek. She's now Aranka Fortwängler. She's had a training class since 1989 in Freiburg. Or my future husband, Yehuda Hanefeld. But what I do remember was that after 20 minutes I jumped up and had to leave. It was a very intense experience, put it like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the experience?
I felt sick and dizzy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I found it very threatening. And the background to that, which I only elucidated, I don't know when, probably during my training, was that I'd been attacked as a 15-year-old and abused sexually. And while he abused me, it was during the day, and he strangled me.
Oh no!
Yeah, and I was left totally alone with this event, and obviously there's somebody going like this to me all the time. God. And that was what was so threatening for me, but it took a long time to, I felt sick from the Alexander Technique for the first 6 years of having lessons or being in the class. But I always felt better afterwards, this sense of lightness. So that's why I always came back for more.
But you weren't aware about the connection?
No, initially not at all.
And it wasn't just when somebody put their hand there?
Oh, it was, up to this very day. My throat is incredibly sensitive. Yeah.
Well, you could have asked people not to touch your neck.
Well, I was 24, 25, and sense of agency was not yet developed. And I only had, when I started training in 1986, and it was all male teachers.
Yeah.
And so I never got that far.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you had a very mixed bag of experiences.
Yeah, and
initially.
Also, positive as the end outcome, but the actual Alexander experience I found pretty threatening. I think that's the right word, without understanding why it was so threatening. But I felt good afterwards. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And when did you become aware of the reason, or when did you make the connection?
Probably sometime during my training. I think it was when we had nearly all male teachers, and at one point a woman, I can't remember her name, but I realized that it had something to do with maleness that was so threatening for me, because the Alexander Technique, it's a very clear, close but distant contact. And that is when I realized that I kind of relaxed, or I felt free in a different way working with this woman, and not all these, they were wonderful teachers that we had in the class, but they were definitely all male and I was definitely female, and there was something threatening in there, and that's when I started realizing what had been going on.
Oh wow. Yeah. And that's really an important topic that a lot of teachers are not aware of.
Yep.
And there can be a lot of reasons why people can't tolerate a hand.
Yeah. And I do believe it's something that the Alexander community doesn't talk enough about.
Yes, definitely.
Abuse, sexual abuse, trauma. I know Anthony works with, he calls it trauma-informed Alexander Technique, which is great, but we're still a bit Victorian talking about sexual abuse, and I think 1 in every 3 women have experienced some kind of abuse.
Yeah. And
we have to be aware of that when we're working with people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Really an important topic.
Yeah.
That's why I find it so important to have female voices also in the interviews.
Yeah, there you go.
And your male teachers also didn't wonder why you felt sick after in lessons? None of them had a thought about that?
During class, there was, as is still in many Alexander training courses, this thing about don't trust your feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Which is confusing emotions with kinesthetic experiences. So that just, you get kind of indoctrinated with your feelings are wrong. Yeah. And they were wonderful teachers. I was trained by the Israelis that trained with McDonald in the 60s, and they're very, very skilled with their hands, but that is not a culture where you have space to talk about what's going on inside yourself.
Yeah, I think there are a few topics that can be difficult. It's this don't trust your feelings, and also the misunderstanding of inhibition.
Yeah, it's this confusion in the Alexander world that your feelings are unreliable. But my argumentation is, well, why do people come back for a lesson? Because they feel good.
Yeah.
So there's obviously some trust in your feelings, otherwise we'd all be unemployed, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
It's quite simple in my mind.
Yeah, but also this thing of inhibition, not reacting or trying not to react.
Yeah. Yeah.
If something doesn't feel right in the lesson.
It's confusing suppression with what we understand, what real inhibition is, yeah.
And that is also not really talked about enough, I find.
Yeah.
Straight on to the juicy topics.
Well, there you go.
So how do you incorporate this in your own teaching?
I became very involved in person-centered counselling, and I did the training on Carl Rogers' work 3 times.
3 times?
Yeah, it impressed me so much, and so I incorporate. I try to be very aware of what's going on inside my clients. So I talk to people at the beginning of the lesson, talk to people at the end of the lesson, I talk to people during the lesson. If I pick up something, I ask them, is this okay for you? Tell me where you are. There's a lot of verbal feedback, and I try to be empathetic, non-judgmental, but also a real person, genuine, this authenticity that is one of the variables of the Rogers work. So I think that's an added dimension of the Alexander technique that has not been integrated enough throughout. There's still lots of teachers, as Alexander also did, you could give them the experience and send them home again.
Yeah.
You're nodding, sounds like you know what I'm talking about.
Well, the whole emotional stuff, of course, in my training was center stage. So we talked a lot about all that.
Yeah,
and also about Carl Rogers and different kinds of psychotherapy and so on. And the whole trauma conversation, Gabor Mate and Basil van der Kolk and all of them. And also the relationship aspect, like Martin Buber was one of the big topics in my time. And I really enjoyed that. That's probably why I subconsciously came to London to train.
This relational aspect, I think, has been neglected.
Sometimes it is, yes.
Yeah. Well, at least the era that I came from.
Yeah. But it's so important.
Yep.
So with all these various experiences, how did it happen that you trained?
Well, my partner became Wilfried Hanefeld, and he was very into teaching, and I was impressed with it, and he set up the German affiliated society of STAT, so the Alexander Technique was kind of everywhere. And then in 1985, there were plans to start a class in Freiburg in southwest Germany, where I live, and Mary Holland came, and but she decided to train in people in Munich, set up a school in Munich. And we knew that Yehuda Kuperman had classes in Basel, and Basel is in Switzerland, is only like 40 minutes away from Freiburg. So the idea was to entice Yehuda to come to Freiburg, and which he agreed then. And although he had been training, there had been a class before I joined. I don't know when the first class in Freiburg was set up. And so I decided to join in 1986 to 1989. I trained with Yehuda.
And how was the experience during the training with Yehuda, apart from the topics we talked about already?
Yeah, what I appreciated from my training course was we had many very competent, skilled Israeli teachers. So his named assistant was Uri Eshet, and Shaike Hermalin visited the class, and Schmuel Nelken and Misha Magidov, Giora Pinkas, so very skilled, hands-on, but there was no structure. It was always just chair, walking and table. And I was pregnant twice during my training class, which made me super sensitive. I gave birth to my first daughter 7 months after starting the course.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it worked fine because the course was very near to where I live, so I used to breastfeed and run over to the class. But the difficult thing was being hypersensitive. Yeah, and I was not, when I was pregnant with my son, he was born just at time perfectly to the end of the class. I wasn't sleeping well. So it was tough sometimes for me, and it was also one of these weekend classes I think are no longer allowed. We started on Friday afternoon, the whole of Saturday and the whole of Sunday. So, you know, by the end of Sunday, everybody was kind of 3/4 dead, including Yehuda, because he had 2 classes in Basel anyway, so he was often very exhausted.
Oh my God.
And so there were quite, you know, there was dissonances because of that, and one knew that he didn't have much energy left, but that brought in these very good other teachers. So, you know, the hands-on work was wonderful, but I had no idea what was going on. So I know lots of people, oh, the training was wonderful, marvelous. I can't really say that of my training. Yeah.
So what was missing? The kind of conversation about it?
The structure, the relationship side. It was just give the work and the next, and give the work, and we all were, I think, left pretty much alone with the processes.
Yeah.
You know, it was all about receiving the work and working it out on one's own, which obviously I did, but that's not the optimal way for me to learn. No, you know, a little bit more support, Begleitung. What's Begleitung in English? Support, Begleitung. Yeah, so it wasn't an easy training course, but I'm still very grateful that I did it.
Okay, and after the training, you graduated in when? 89, you said?
And I was very fortunate that Wilfried, he's now my ex-husband, we divorced in 2003, he set up a course independently of Yehuda in Freiburg, and Dan Ormond was head of training, and we had that class for 12 years, so I had 12 years of being an assistant teacher in this kind of safe space to develop as a teacher.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was really excellent. Yeah.
Did you also build up a practice?
Yeah.
Private practice?
But when I look back today, I mean, I was having sometimes, it was still the days when I was doing half-hour lessons, and so lesson at 2:00 and the next person turned up at 2:30, and this kind of 7 lessons a day, so it's not the way I work anymore. I've changed that. But yes, I had quite a lot of clients quite quickly.
And it was still the time when there was a big demand in Alexander.
Yeah.
That's what I hear from all the people I interviewed that they had waiting lists. The schools had waiting lists, and of course that has
we had
changed.
15 people in the class sometimes, so it went well. Yeah, sadly that has changed. You're right.
Okay, so for 12 years you assisted and had your private practice and had a family.
Yep.
Which is quite a lot.
Yeah, my third child was born at home, and Wilfried, as a teacher, was present at the birth of all 3 children. They were 3 intervention-free births, and I had no back pain during the pregnancy and also afterwards in postpartum, carrying the kids. Obviously I was exhausted afterwards, but that laid the seeds for doing my PhD later. And to have an intervention-free birth these days is quite unusual, so I was very grateful. And having a third child was born at home, and the midwife, she actually, the baby will come about 5 o'clock, and it was 11 at night, and I'm going to go and sleep. So she went. I was on the sofa, and she went to the bedroom and had a nap. And with Wilfried, we did the whole of the first stage alone. And it was only like 2.5 hours. Oh. And then something went click in me. I said, go and get Afi. Her name was Afi. And the baby was born at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Incredibly intensive. And the waters had already burst and her head was on my cervix. So I had no respite from the contractions. And incredibly intensive, but again, the Alexander Technique, I could see through the 3 births how I could accept. This was 1994. It was the first birth. 3 days afterwards, I remember walking around. Everything was stiff, so I'd obviously tensed my whole body during the contractions. That was 12-hour birth. The second birth of my son was 9 hours, and that was at the end of the training course, and I didn't have this general pain. And when Yvonne was born, 2.5 hours in labour, not realising how quickly it was going, I was up and about, walking to have a shower afterwards. So you could really see what the way that I dealt with this intense pain was letting it be. Yeah. And there's no resistance, and this, of course, came from the Alexander Technique. Yeah.
Okay. And your PhD, how much later was that?
Yeah, that was 2017. And I was coming up to my 60th birthday, and I kept asking myself, is this it? Just clients and courses? Is there anything else out there? And always the inner response was, no, this is not it. There is something else. But I had, of course, no idea what that was. And then it was the 1st of February 2017, and I'm not on social media very often, but on this day I was in Luxembourg. I'd been working in Luxembourg, and I remember scrolling through and again and again, and going down. Right at the bottom of my feed was Leslie Glover, who is an English, she lives in Yorkshire, Alexander colleague, and she advertised a scholarship for researching the Alexander Technique in pregnancy. I saw it and I just knew, okay, that's it, I'm going to do it. And I really thought I was crazy. She was 60, going back to university after 38 years of not being in academia. But I was, I really wanted to do it. And so I applied and I had an interview and I was accepted. And so everything changed. And I went back. I had absolute privilege of being able to think for 3.5 years about our work, being in the brain space of what we're doing, not all just giving people the experience, but trying to elucidate what are the elements of this experience. How do we get there? What is really going on? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I can. How long do you want to be here?
So how did you get from the practical experience that you had for many, many years to the theoretical research? Or how did you go about it?
Yes, that was a big question mark in my life at the time as well. So I had no idea what was expected of me. But the first thing we did was a literature review, and I suggested we look at the frequency of back pain in pregnant women. Mm-hmm. And at one point the research shifted from pregnancy to the postpartum. Mm-hmm. So I did a literature review about what the frequency of back pain is when women are carrying their children and still have this very common pregnant posture. Mm. And everybody was really surprised and perhaps a bit disconcerted or shocked. There's hardly any research out there at all. So I took, I think it was 2008 to 2018, and did a literature research for randomized controlled trials on postpartum back pain. 10 projects came up, which is nothing.
Yeah.
And at least 3 of those papers were rubbish. One can't say it otherwise. So that in itself was also a finding that the postpartum and the physicalities and the difficulties women have, that was already a finding that it's a neglected field of research.
Yeah. Well, research is still very much male-dominated and
exactly.
about a male subject.
Yeah. And there's no money to be made with back pain, that kind of back pain.
Yeah.
So then we set up an interview research project with women who had experience of the Alexander Technique, teachers, people in training, and clients. And I had to learn a certain way of interviewing people on their lived experience of using the Alexander Technique in the postpartum. And then I had to analyze all these interviews, which took at least a year to do. First you've got to find the people, recruit them, do the interviews, do the analysis, and then write it up. Mm. And it was very clear from the interview, the results or the findings, that women were using semi-supine to self-care, and their struggles with a sense of duty, a sense of maternal duty, and how difficult it was for them to prioritize for themselves. Yeah. But with the Alexander Technique, when they made the decision to prioritize for themselves, how that promoted their well-being. Mm. So wonderful findings, and this sense of agency that I think everybody who's involved in the Alexander Technique knows, that we increase our connection to ourselves, our relationship to ourselves, and that enables us to make decisions to look after ourselves. Mm. So that was the second. So the literature review was the first part of the PhD. The second part was this interview study. And then the pandemic came up, and I wanted to work with women who had no experience of the Alexander Technique, but in the pandemic you can't do that. So then I had my supervisors, Leslie Glover, she was an Alexander Technique teacher, and the other supervisor was Julie Jamin, she's a professor of midwifery. And we all together, and Fran Waderfuhl, she was also part of the team, and we set up a online postpartum self-care program. I can't remember what we called it. And we recruited, I think, about 15 women in the UK, and they received videos, they received writing, they had a WhatsApp message guiding them through semi-supine. And then when they'd done all these, they had to, I think 14 times, they had to lie down in semi-supine and work on themselves without ever having an Alexander lesson.
Oh, wow.
And then we looked at the results, and they were very positive. So it was quite amazing how you can put input via just an online self-care program, I think we called it, package, that was the name. Mm. And they were amazed. I mean, some people were saying they felt lighter and freer, they had less back pain, and nobody had touched them.
Yeah. And you didn't consider giving online lessons?
No, because there would have been too many variables. It was this putting them into the space on their own
Yeah.
Yeah.
But having hands-on lessons would be the same.
We could have done a focus group in a group. That was the original plan, but we couldn't do that. So this is all part of how research functions.
Okay.
But it was okay how it worked, and so I wrote up and had published in midwifery in one of these peer research journals. The first study and the second study also got published, which in addition to writing the dissertation was very challenging. This is a certain way to write, and abstract 100 words and no more. So for me, the most important thing about going back to university was realizing, and that's where I used my Alexander knowledge, the most important thing about writing is not writing, is this letting go. And again I said, I can just walk away from this. I wasn't putting myself under pressure. I said, nobody's forcing me to do this.
Yeah.
And letting everything go, and then I came back a couple of days later and I was fine. Yeah. But it was tough. I mean, academia is very competitive, and that was not where I was coming from. So without the Alexander Technique, I would never have survived the 3.5 years without working on myself.
Yeah. But you had been to university earlier?
Yeah, I did. I've got a degree in biology at the University of Reading. But when I returned to university, I hadn't been to university for 38 years. It was a bit of a shock to my brain, yes. And of course, it's a privilege to be paid to think about the Alexander Technique. It was a great privilege. And so there were lots of elements and then the person-centered work came in. Rogers has several theories that Alexander doesn't have. For example, his theory or his conceptualization of the self is very simple. It's just something that reacts and that is there. But Carl Rogers has a very differentiated conceptualization of the self. His conceptualization includes values, for example. It includes bringing things into awareness that are potentially were not in awareness. And of course, that is all about understanding our negative habitual patterns of movement or behavior. And so I integrated, when I was writing up the dissertation, I integrated that aspect because it does explain why the Alexander Technique, how it functions. I mean, anybody who's ever given Alexander lessons, the example I always use is, oh, my shoulders are tense. And of course, in the course of a lesson, people start to realize, I'm tensing my shoulders. You have the ownership of that.
Yeah.
And that means you update your conceptualization of yourself.
Also that was also an understanding Alexander had, no?
Yeah, but it's not in his conceptualization of self. He writes about it that my conceptualization of self is thus very simple, and people make it complicated. So he wasn't actually prepared, and he wasn't a psychologist, of course. So I can accept that he saw it like that, but I think Rogers' conceptualization that the self changes, it's a gestalt, it gets updated. I mean, my conceptualization of myself when I was 20, I would say I was very reactive. I'm not very reactive. I mean, I can still get mad, but I can decide if I'm going to get mad now. So, and it's this update that Rogers includes in his conceptualization. I don't think bringing things into awareness, I don't think Alexander has that kind of aspect in his conceptualization of the self. And it's also use of the self. There's something dualistic in there. What is using the self? So I don't use that terminology. I talk about self-management.
But isn't he meaning the responsibility that we are doing things to ourselves? Or wasn't that his very first realization? That he was doing something to himself that created his hoarseness?
Yes, but I'm talking just about his way. I know what you mean, but his manner of writing about the self, because that belongs in the area of academia. So that is one aspect of the Rogers work that got included in the dissertation. Then there's also this thing from Carl Rogers about becoming more authentic, which I think anybody that has done the training or takes lessons, it's because we're continually connecting to ourselves. You again and again, you are in contact with what is going on. And I think most of us were brought up with what's going on out there and not what's going on here. So this increase in congruence. And the other thing is that the self-actualizing tendency, I also included that in the dissertation. And it's this tendency to grow and change and develop, which is central to person-centered approach. And I think we all know that the Alexander Technique promotes personal growth, but what are the mechanics of it? Rogers articulates that. Alexander just knows that it happens, or happened.
Okay, good. And then you kind of finished that?
Big relief that I'd finished and got through to it, but I had set up in 2000, when our training class closed down, I set up a little company called SPEEK, with two other Alexander colleagues, and with a profile and logo and a specific target group. So I just continued with that work, but with much more clarity and confidence what I'm actually doing. And that has really come to fruition because I can articulate obviously you can't do a PhD without drawing on research, and there is quite a body of research in the meantime, and having that research in my mind. I had a GP who came for lessons, and he's obviously a medical doctor, and you can talk about the results in a different way if you've been through 3.5 years of university. I mean, I don't spend an Alexander lesson talking about research, but at certain points it is useful to point in certain directions or print a paper out and give it to somebody. So that was just an additional resource, and it professionalized my work in a certain way. So I appreciated that.
And what was the initial idea with SPEEK, with 2 E's?
SPEEK stands for, in German, Sprache, Präsentation, Ergonomie, Effektivität und Kommunikation. So speech, presenting, ergonomy, ergonomy, is that what it says?
Ergonomics?
Ergonomics, thank you.
I don't know.
Efficiency and communication. And I had a big passion for supporting people with presenting professionals, because so many people can't talk and no body language. So because as my biology background was animal behavior, and one little corner of me still sees people as primates, and we communicate non-verbally. So that was my special passion. And clients that, I remember having a phone call for somebody in southwest Germany where I live, and he had an incredibly strong Alemannish dialect, and I hardly understood anything.
Oh dear.
And he was a Handwerker. What's that? He's a
builder?
Whatever. Yeah, but he was into curtains and windows, and he was the head of the Innung. I don't know what the English word is. But anyway, he was an important guy within the
Decorators Guild.
Yeah, Guild. There you go. Thank you. And he had to give a speech in front of 800 people once a year, and so it was great fun working with him. And he was very wide awake and that kind of work. So it's just having a certain profile where people could find you within Freiburg, or I was for 7 or 8 years. I was a trainer at the city of Freiburg for work-life balance courses with employees, and you, as an individual Alexander Technique teacher, you don't get access to that kind of client. Those, because it's you professionalize yourself with a certain profile. We had a business consultation, and
so you mean building a company is
profile,
helpful,
with a specific target group. So our target group was stressed executives.
Interesting. And that's what you did up until the PhD, or continuing?
Yeah, in the first year of the PhD, I tried to continue giving lessons, but I knew I had to concentrate on the PhD because it really is full-time. But that was okay. And then people returned when I finished.
Oh, really? So 5 years later?
I have a client, he's been coming for 5 years, but he took a break for 17 years.
Wow.
So that's the advantage of living in one city. I've been in Freiburg for 44 years, so you have your network and
Okay.
So the communication, you asked about what the profile is. So I was happy to work with people who are presenting, people with stress-related issues, burnout, but the Carl Rogers work, the communication, that also flowed into the SPEEK concept.
Okay, on to the subject. The Alexander Technique. What is the most important aspect of the technique for you?
Becoming more aware of detrimental self-management habits, bringing them into awareness and discovering the resources how to modify those detrimental stress and tension habits.
How did it change your life?
In one sentence?
Yeah, I know, it's a bit...
Well, it's so integrated, so part of me. I mean, I could write a whole book about that. Obviously, I healed from my trauma. I became more aware. I discovered my sense of agency. It influenced how I parented, and now I've got 4 grandchildren. It influences how I interact with my grandchildren. There's not an area of I was very ill over Christmas, also Christmas and New Year. I had pneumonia, and it even turned up there. You know, it was just accepting what was going on and sitting there for hours, days and weeks, just breathing. So I don't think there's any area of my life where Alexander principles are integrating, being aware of what is going on and being able to observe am I reacting, can I stop reacting, and working on myself. It's a huge resource.
What's your current elevator pitch about what is the Alexander Technique?
It depends who I'm talking to. So I would never just have one way of explaining the Alexander Technique. Clients have always come to me from personal recommendations, so I don't do any advertising. But there are situations, recently, only about a year ago, I said to somebody I'd known for quite a while, and I could see the way he was moving that he had back pain, and I quite cheekily said, you don't have to do that, you don't have to walk around like that. Would you like an Alexander lesson? And he said yes, and he came, and he's now had over 20 lessons. So it's also, I think, an Alexander Technique, as of a certain maturity, you are your own visiting card. So at the moment I'm debating telling my dentist something because he broke his elbow in a bike accident, and I can see what he's doing with himself, and I know very well that I've got enough to do. I'm not gonna so I don't really, I mean, perhaps 20, 30 years ago I was into elevator pitches, but now, because I find clients through personal relations, and the first lesson is always, very low threshold to come for a lesson. Let them find out, knowing full well that people will feel good afterwards. But as I said beforehand, the Alexander Technique is a method for increasing your awareness of detrimental self-management habits related to stress and tension. And I mean, everybody's stressed out and tense. So if I do have to explain it, it's that kind of, and of course, developing a toolkit to counteract these kinds of detrimental self-management habits. So developing personal resources and learning to observe yourself.
Yeah.
It's so much about awareness. I mean, we land again and again in the physical realm with back pain or performance even, but it's this awareness. So here is our habitual self-management. For me, Alexander Technique is developing the second awareness, an awareness of observing yourself. As somebody who's into photography, which I am as well, you know what that means.
Yes. And you proactively talk to people about what you do when you see something like the example?
Yeah, I became quite cheeky.
Wow, that's
why
quite
not? Why
courageous.
Why not? If you can see what is going on and you know that there is potential. And I had a mentee from the German Society, and I was encouraging her to do acquisition by this persönliche Ansprache, by personally addressing somebody. Why do we have to be so quiet about what we have on offer?
Can you give me some brief definitions of the principles?
I don't use the terminology primary control.
Yeah.
I talk about head-neck back relationship, and it was also interesting in the interviews that I did during PhD, the women were not using that terminology either. And I think that is wise because in my opinion, sometimes it's primary that people become more aware of their heels and gravity, that they stop holding themselves here.
Yeah.
So the central instance, this central axis, of course I do value it highly. It is becoming the head-neck-back relationship, bringing it into balance is very central to our work. And when that system is in balance, then the other systems, the emotional system, the mental cognitive system, they also come into balance. Because you can't, my experience is if somebody is balanced here, you can't be disbalanced on the other levels of being. It's just not, because we're holistic creatures.
Yeah. So
I do emphasize the centrality of Alexander's discovery, that if we're here, if we're free here, that very positive processes come in to start working. And inhibition, learning not to react, that is something people cotton on to incredibly quickly, because everybody kind of is aware that they are reactive. So that's not a big issue.
Yeah.
Direction is also part of our jargon that I don't find very helpful. So I talk about it being becoming communicating with yourself in a certain way in relationship to the centrality of the head-neck-back relationship, which of course is our direction. And I'm very verbal about the directions. I say the directions during my lessons, and sometimes I check after a few, perhaps about 8 or 9 lessons, if somebody has internalized that. And then you hear things, I let my head be free, and I said no, it's about letting your neck be free. So people often don't know where the parts of the body are.
But you use the verbal, the classical
totally.
directions.
Yeah, yeah. And the force of habit, people know about that. It's not difficult to elucidate.
Yeah.
What else we got? You said 5. The use of the concept of the use of the self. So that's connected with habitual behavior. But as I mentioned, I talk about self-management and not the use of the self.
Yeah. Unreliable sensory awareness.
I'm not into that that concept. So I don't work with a mirror anymore, but when I did, you can easily point out, I had one, actually she was the woman I did the business consultation for SPEEK with, and as many people, she was here, and when I took her to here, she felt she was here, and so you point to the mirror, and she made her Fuchsteufelsbild, she got mad, and at one point she said, "Your mirror is wrong." So that is, when I was using a mirror, you can quite easily make people aware that how they think they are, it's incorrect, but that does bring people into knots, I think, because then they try to do it right.
Yeah.
So that is something I trust that if somebody takes 20 or 30 lessons, they will start becoming aware that how they think they should be is not conducive to feeling free, feeling happy, feeling relaxed. So I think that issue, and it's not easy, your sensory perception is unreliable, it's not an easy thing to digest.
Yeah.
Give them something to read, and I just trust the process. And what I've been really developing the last few years is starting with somebody who has experience of the work. I put them in front of the stool, and I don't put my hands, but I talk them through the process. So be aware of your heels, let your breathing become freer, let your shoulders be down and out, be aware that your head can balance on the top of your spine. Depends where they are, perhaps they need to widen here and look out, of course. And after talking them through the process, then I say, how do you feel? Has anything changed? And everybody gives you feedback, everybody gives you different feedback, but most often is that I'm using my legs more and I'm breathing more freely, and you can see the facial expression change. And that is, for me, enough for them to start sussing out that how they think they are looking after themselves is not as efficient as getting into the Alexander space and really consciously committing their weight to their heels and breathing more and all the stuff we do.
Yeah.
So I let people suss it out quite a lot on their own.
And how do you bring the emotional work into the emotional side of things into the work?
At the beginning of a lesson, I'll ask, let's give me an update. And then you hear, I've got a client at the moment, she's a primary school teacher, and I ask how she's managing her day. And she's somebody who's kind of a high achiever and very conscientious in her work, but she stresses herself out with this mindset. And so I asked her what could be your anchor, and she has a thermos can of tea, and she uses that to take a moment for herself. And that is the moment in her working day where she will breathe more freely, look out and connect with herself. And then I can hear what she's reporting, and I say that sounds like you're feeling much more relaxed in everyday life. And the more, so it's kind of reaffirming the process at the beginning of the lesson. And joy comes in then, because there are less tension related backache, shoulder ache, headache, whatever. So that is the check-in part of a lesson, but also, of course, during the lesson, but especially at the end of the lesson, somebody sits down again, and you can see how somebody feels. So I might ask something, where you're sensing the work the most, and then they will tell me, and then I can, with the person-centered approach, perhaps deepen that a little bit, so you're feeling more connected to yourself, or you're feeling relaxed, or you're surprised about the process, so I can pick up the emotions in a short exchange at the end of the lesson.
Okay. Anything you would like to add?
No, don't think there's anything. It was good to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Nicola.